Yeah, I think this is a common issue. I think it's 30% of Gen AI use cases, in fact, move to production. And I think the systemic cause of that is oftentimes not considering the qualitative and the quantitative value of these use cases. Or when we look at them, it's a very short-sighted consideration, right? We're not looking at, year 2, year 3, total cost of ownership, and really anchoring it to a business strategy, which is the other part of really addressing the ROI. What are we trying to build? What's the cost to build the product and then sustain? And then how do we make sure that the enterprise really embraces it with enablement and adoption?
Yeah, so I think right now, the democratization of this technology makes these projects super tantalizing, right? So everybody knows what these technologies do now. They are using them in their personal lives, and then they want to just basically throw this technology at every problem that they see within their organizations. And I think if you want to have sustainable, lasting change, you need to kind of get back to first principles, understand, to Johanna's point, what business value are we trying to drive with this project? And then again, from there it becomes fundamentals, right? What are my KPIs? How do we minimize our exposure to risk in here? Like, let's fail fast if we're going to fail. And then when we do go into production, how do we measure that we're being successful? So again, I think it's really fundamentals and just kind of applying it in the agentic AI era.
Yeah, I think always playing offense is really, really important as we think about what's to come next. Agility is going to be a key cultural attribute. So whether it is supply chain resiliency, which is critically important right now because of those geopolitical dynamics, how do you build for resilient, diverse supply chains in a way that considers multiple scenarios? I also think it's around literacy, bringing AI or other emerging technologies, whether it's quantum or other curiosities into your workforce, I think will be really, really critical. And then starting out to align on that business strategy at the top where it cascades down and looks much more cross-functional and enterprise-wide, so that when we make a decision or we need to react to something that happens, it's much easier to move together, because really scale at these enterprise customers and organizations is very hard to be resilient and move and react quickly unless you're proactively building that into your workforce skill set, instilling in how your leadership is carrying themselves, right? Any change needs to be modeled at the top, so it shows strategic commitment and boosts readiness. Those will be key skills, because what is not known is what the future is going to bring, but agility will be needed.
Yeah, I think we all know the expression garbage in, garbage out, right? If you don't have good data strategy, if you've got a data lake that does not have good governance, data quality is not being measured, or data sets or data assets are not available within the organization, you're not going to be able to drive the value that you want, right? So I think it starts from, like, if we're thinking about pharma in particular, right? You think about the traditional barriers in pharma between, say, commercial and medical, or commercial and clinical. Those barriers are really more fundamental business barriers, or not technology barriers. They become technology barriers, but it's because that we've put these barriers up around compliance, or what we think about as being compliance. And these common orthodoxies, I think we're starting to challenge in this era, where we're saying maybe this piece of data, if anonymized in the right way or de-identified in the right way, can actually be leveraged for good on the commercial side or on the clinical side. But again, at the end of the day, it requires that strong architectural footprint to make sure that if we do make those decisions at the business level to start to share data sets, we actually have a strong technology asset to be able to drop those data sets, so that we can start to drive value from them at the AI level.
I think data standardization, it's a hard thing to take on, but it's a required thing at this point in time. And then a unified governance structure. And again, I think making governance your offense and not your defense. How do you enable role-based appropriate access to your data versus shutting it down as your kind of baseline assumption and decisions? Yep. I think is really, really key to making data an organizational asset.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're experiencing enough disruption, I think, right now as it is. But I think it's really the proliferation of new frameworks, new models, new ways of deploying some of this technology that is going to be the disruptor, right? And so trying to understand, as our customers are looking across the landscape, at who are going to be the leaders from an infrastructure standpoint, who are going to be the leaders from a platform standpoint, so that I can hitch a ride to some of those hyperscalers, as we call them, and so that we're not building infrastructure ourselves, or we're not sort of, we're not slowing ourselves down by building our own technologies, so that we can kind of focus on where we're adding value. So, I think once these technologies start to get deployed into production, going back to Johanna's point, it's going to be all about governance, right? Thinking about observability. We've got agents out in the world that are interacting with HCPs and patients. What are they saying? What are they doing, right? We're talking about probabilistic workflows. And so before any of that happens, we need to make sure that we're looking out over the horizon, understanding what technologies, what frameworks we can adopt to help make sure that we can go deploy these technologies with trust.
I think the biggest one will be impactful to everyone, which is the agentic AI, change will end the individual contributor. We will be collaborating in a new way. The agents will be augmenting human work, which will make the human work really important to really suss out what is the value, how can we take on things that we haven't had the capacity to do in the past, including collaborating across functions, departments, across the value chain. And I think that is going to be a really new way of working, and really put pressure on our operating models, our org structures. I oftentimes will call it ego architecture. I think will be exposed, where we've built these silos, maybe not for business value, but around kind of protectionism and that data custodial kind of operating systems that I don't think will be relevant in the future.